unusually chipper, given what you're about to review, and given that you couldn't make your annual Labor Day crossover this year. Oh, I'm not too worried about that. In fact, I'd say a couple of gratuitous cameos should be dropping in just about... Yo, Rangoon boys!
Whoa! Yeah!
Guys, what the frack? I know the internet reviewer racket has gone downhill lately, but where's our rhythm? I mentioned Muppet Wish Day last time, then I suggest on Twitter I'm about to review the worst Muppet production ever. That's when you do your thing, right?
We do thing what now?
What, I saw you in Nash's Dark Crystal review. Butting in to gripe about bad Henson films is what you do, right?
No, not really. No.
Huh?
I mean, it's not like there weren't hiccups throughout the entirety of Henson's career. You ever see the original Muppet Show pilot? Rough, man.
Jim experimented a lot, and not everything he did panned out. But respect the man for trying.
I guess so, but this is a post-Jim work we're talking about here.
Plenty good stuff there.
Really? Even Muppets Tonight?
Criminally underrated series. It gave us some fantastic new characters. And the episode with Prince? Oh, magnifique.
Muppets from Space?
I had fun with that one. Funkalicious soundtrack, too.
The 2015 Muppet Show!
An awful start. But it got a lot better after the mid-season soft reboot, which was unfortunately too little too late. Still, not worth getting all up in a dandelion about.
Yeah, it's all cool. Jim was a positive guy. He wouldn't want fans of his work to be like that.
Huh, okay. So, you guys wouldn't have a visceral negative reaction to me reviewing this.
You poor bastard.
We gonzo.
That's what I thought. Title sequence! Welcome to TV Trash. It's always hard to replace a legend, even when you keep it in the family. After Jim Henson passed in 1990, his son Brian took over the Muppets and looked to find a way to bring Kermit, Fozzie, Gonzo, and all their friends back to viewing audiences in a way that a new generation could enjoy. The solution was to use his father's creations in film adaptations and retellings of classic stories. Not that there wasn't precedent, given that Jim had made a Muppets TV adaptation of The Frog Prince, which yes, maybe we'll get to one of these days. But the main point is, it worked! The Muppet Christmas Carol and Muppet Treasure Island became just as beloved as the original trilogy of Muppet films in the 70s and 80s, as well as the legendary Muppet Show that preceded them. So much so that when they tried to go back to the old format with an original tale in Muppets from Space, and that bombed horribly at the box office, the Jim Henson Company decided to go back to the second well and make their next film another classic story adaptation. However, it was by this time that Disney had bought up the rights to all the Muppets, for the most part, and thus began the first of way too many occasions that have led the fan base to think the mouse doesn't care very much for the frog. The next Muppet film saw its production not only handed over to Touchstone Television, but also outsourced to Fox Television Studios. And remember, this was nearly a decade and a half before Disney buying up Fox was anything more than a Simpsons gag. The movie premiered on ABC in 2005, making it the only full-length Muppet film to not get a theatrical release. All that was bad enough to make it look like there wasn't a lot of faith in the project. but the choice of source material for adaptation probably didn't help matters. If there is any classic story anyone should think twice about before adapting, it would be The Wizard of Oz. That's because the 1939 film from Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer has become so entrenched in our lexicon that almost anyone today will think about it before ever thinking of the original L. Frank Baum novel. There may have been a handful of attempts by other companies to tell a version that further expands on the full universe Baum created, and maybe one or two of those are in the back of your mind. But ultimately, when you think of The Wizard of Oz, you think of Judy Garland in ruby slippers and songs being sung by the Lollipop Guild. I can't think of another adaptation not made by the Mouse-Eared Empire that outshines its source material that much. So, what would happen when the mouse tries to adapt that story using characters they've mistreated about as much as WWE did with ex-WCW stars? It's time to find out as we dare look into The Muppet Wizard of Oz. After we open up with a storybook shot that makes us wonder why they never use this in Disney's own animated productions anymore, the actual story begins with a music video.
Wind blowing through my hair, everybody telling me there's nowhere like home. Oh no.
Why didn't you just air this thing on MTV? Oh right, because it has a music video. Oh, there's a purpose to this intro, people. See, in this story, our Dorothy, who is played by R&B music star Ashanti, dreams of becoming an R&B music star in order to get away from her dull life on a farm in Kansas. Except she doesn't live on a farm. She lives in a trailer park and works in a diner owned by Uncle Henry and Auntie Em, who here are played by David Alan Grier and Queen Latifah. Yep, they're going all contemporary here. But see, they're not ripping off the 39 movie at all. No, they're ripping off The Wiz. So Dorothy is all anxious to get an audition with the Muppets. Wait, so the Muppets are actual living beings in Dorothy's world, much like in the original Muppet films? But we know from the promos that characters in Oz will be played by Muppets, much like in the 90s films. This movie is gonna rip space and time a new blowhole, isn't it? Dorothy just misses the audition and then kinda gets the cold shoulder from the Muppets as they are heading out. Wow, have they all become divas? Miss Piggy's been a bad influence on everybody. Before she heads home, just as, you guessed it, a tornado is approaching. Because a tornado hitting a trailer park has not at all been overused in any way. Auntie and Uncle are headed to the storm shelter, but Dorothy runs back into the house in order to save Toto, who is a fish in this movie. Oh, there's a reason they're doing that too. Prepare to hurt. So y'all know what happens next. Dorothy gets trapped in the house as the house gets picked up by the cyclone, and it ultimately crashes down into the magical kingdom of Oz, where the fish Toto has now turned into Pepe the Prawn. Otherwise known as the challenge accepted to anyone who thought there could never be another Muppet more annoying than Elmo.
You're all big. And you're talking.
See? But more importantly, I'm negro guy.
Seriously, why? Why is this thing Toto? Who was really asking for this? I mean, it's not like there isn't already a very prominent dog character among the Muppets that would be absolutely perfect for the role, especially since said character was musically inclined himself and would then complement this Dorothy's musical ambitions. Was that the reason? Did Ashanti not want to be shown up by Rolf in this movie? And if you think it's because they have a much better role for him, spoiler alert, Ralph doesn't appear in the movie at all! What the hell even? I mean, they at least give a role to Rizzo, who would have been my second choice for Toto since he played sidekick characters in the other two adaptation films. Here, Rizzo and all the other rats are the Munchkins, which I guess makes sense given the roles the rats usually had in the movies from the 80s.
Get over here and get this tin can off me! Now!
Wait, that voice.
I'm gonna put you in a better place! In my oven! You hear me? This is a lot heavier than
Okay, I want to know how they convinced her to play the Wicked Witch without half the Muppet studio getting smashed in a karate-fueled rage.
Bonjour, Munchkins!
Ah, that's how. Seriously though, this is a casting choice I can get behind. Miss Piggy playing all of the witches. Mind you, one big reason for doing so would be the relative dearth of female Muppet characters, but still, Frank Oz himself said Piggy was probably the most multi-dimensional of the Muppet characters, at least among those he himself performed as. So yeah, having Piggy play all the witches was a good move on the filmmakers. How they portray some of those witches, that will be another matter altogether. It also kinda makes sense that a family of Piggy witches would not be the most tight-knit group. As indicated when Piggy of the North here just shrugs off Piggy of the East getting squashed into bacon and gives Dorothy her shoes. And yes, they are silver shoes here, and that is what they were in the original book. The first movie only changed them to ruby to show off that the film was in color, so let's just get that out of the way.
Listen, High Pockets, here's how things work in Enchanted Lands. Shoes have magical powers. If you have the shoes, you get the powers. But if you're going to question every little detail, the whole thing's gonna fall apart. We might as well call it a day, okay?
Well, they did follow one trait from the first movie. The North Witch is kind of a bitch in this one as well. So Dorothy follows the yellow brick road with Toto, who for whatever reason is dressed as the second worst Philip J. Fry cosplayer ever. I would show you the worst ever, but sadly, no images remain of that horror. I told you to burn those! And one by one, they meet up with the companions. The Scarecrow, played by Kermit, the Tin Woodsman, played by Gonzo, and the Cowardly Lion, played by Fozzie. Though for some reason, Gonzo here is a full-fledged robot used to be the Wicked Witch's version of Spynet. Because trying to make a joke about the CIA and the Patriot Act? I don't know, and I don't think the writers did either. And yeah, let's get this out of the way to those who remember. These are in fact the same parts these Muppets played in an episode of the original Muppet Babies that did a version of the story as well. Only that version had Piggy as Dorothy and, you guessed it, Ralph as Toto! No, I'm not getting over that. Peppy the Prawn is the Wesley Crusher of the Muppets! What's even more baffling is that at no point during this story does Dorothy even mention that these crazy inhabitants of Oz look just like the Muppets. You would think the first thing she'd say upon seeing the Scarecrow is, "Why is Kermit the Frog a scarecrow?" But she doesn't do it. That might not be a problem, except that she was trying to audition for the Muppets at the very beginning of the movie, so what was even the point of that? Another huge problem is how many of the Muppet characters and their personalities and talents are just wasted here. For what it's worth, Kermit is the best choice to be the Scarecrow in this story. For one thing, because of how much the Scarecrow was very much a take-charge leader in the companion's journey to Oz, thus showing how he always had a brain from the beginning, and was thus the choice to eventually replace the wizard as the ruler of Oz. But also because, well, Kermit has always been known for being kind of gangly and throwing his limbs around everywhere, which fits this character really well. But we rarely see any of those traits in this movie. He's just kind of there. We kind of get a shout out to Gonzo's personality, as the reason he wants a heart is so he can have feelings for his old flame Camilla again. But the most character development we actually get is from Fozzie, as they do infuse his trademark of being a comedian and how it ties into his lack of courage. And it's especially seen in this one piece where he and the others have to cross a log while being heckled by, yeah, Statler and Waldorf as Kalitas. Okay, points for the movie including those beasts from the original book, but this is another case where I feel those two were just wasted. But if there's anything that really exposes just how little effort was put into this piece, it's the songs.
I got some smart new partners who can help me think things through. Folks say I'm just a hick on a stick. Well, that may be true.
See, it's true.
But when my stuffing's not enough, I know just what I should do, la-dee-doo. See, I don't miss the brains I'm missing when I'm with you.
Hey, remember when Muppet movies gave us such memorable hits as Rainbow Connection, Happiness Hotel, and even Sailing for Adventure on the Big Blue Wet Thing? Yeah, now we get stuff like this, which is just devoid of any energy and enthusiasm whatsoever. And this is a double problem, because this movie has no choice but to be compared not only to the previous Muppet films and their soundtracks, but also the likes of Over the Rainbow, Ding Dong the Witch is Dead, and The Merry Old Land of Oz from the MGM film. Is that fair? Maybe not, but it's definitely no excuse for this movie putting out a half-assed effort like this. So they pass through the poppy fields, which here is some type of nightclub where Electric Mayhem plays. And Kermit, Gonzo, and Toto call on the Munchkins to get Dorothy and Fozzie out of there because... I guess because in the book it was an army of field mice that helped them, and the writers had backed themselves into a corner by making the rats the Munchkins. Yeah, it was probably at this time they realized they didn't think things through. They make it to the Emerald City, and we get this long, pointless scene where Bunsen and Beaker try to give Dorothy a makeover that includes a Kelly Osbourne cameo because this movie is trying too hard to be trendy. Wait, so Bunsen and Beaker aren't going to play the wizard? Then who is it gonna be? And why do I instantly regret asking that question? Now it's time for them to see the wizard, and like in the book and not the movie, each one is ordered into the chamber individually, and each sees the wizard as something different. Fozzie the Lion sees him as, nope, 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 I quit, frack this whole damn movie, what is even the goddamn hell? What in the 10 circles of hell is this god-awful CGI puke stain doing in a Muppet movie? You could have had anything play the different images of the wizard. Oscar the Grouch, a Gorg from Fraggle Rock, even a Skeksis from the Dark Crystal. I don't think Disney owned any of those Henson creations. Don't interrupt my ranting with facts! The point is there was absolutely no reason to not make any of these an actual puppet creation, just like Jim Henson would have done. And no, I don't buy the whole excuse of the wizard being a bunch of projected images in other versions, because this was their chance to do something really different. Hell, have the wizard in the end be revealed to be an actual puppet master, much like Jim was. That would have been a great tribute to the man and his genius. But no, they instead give us all this nightmare fuel that wouldn't pass muster on the Donkey Kong Country cartoon. So of course the wizard eventually tells them, well, Dorothy at least, that they all have to kill the Wicked Witch of the West. So fast forward them on their way to the West Domain, where we see even more horrific CGI crap. And we also see that in this movie, the Wicked Witch of the West and her flying monkeys are a motorcycle street gang. Because I don't know, because... Did I just watch a horrible attempt to lampoon Brian Blessed and the Hawkmen from the Flash Gordon movie?
Nice digs.
You're late!
You know, like, not everyone has groovy flying motorbikes, okay?
Not my problem.
Yeah, we've been driving the same lousy bus since 1978.
You did not just insult the original Muppet movie!
Pay attention! Listen to moi! This TV special is mine, comme ça, so you can leave! The silver shoes at the door, 'cause the diva's got the floor!
The real Miss Piggy would karate chop a poser like you all the way to Hillshire Farms! The witch and her monkeys take Dorothy and Fozzie prisoner while leaving Kermit and Gonzo literally torn to pieces. That might be the most disturbing thing I've ever seen from Jim Henson Studios. And yes, I've seen The Dark Crystal. And yes, I know that the Scarecrow and Tin Man being left like this and Dorothy having to deal with the witch herself is in tune with the original book, but this is one case where they probably should have taken more of a cue from the classic movie. And it's one more example of how the Muppets in this movie are not used to their potential. In the previous adaptation films, the main protagonist, be it Ebenezer Scrooge or Jim Hawkins, were played by human actors, and the Muppets were essentially complementary to them, but they were still very much active in the story itself and crucial to its resolution. We got Kermit sword-fighting Long John Silver in Muppet Treasure Island, for frack's sake! Here, it just seems like Ashanti steals the spotlight as Dorothy, even more than the character stands out in other versions. Yeah, Tim Curry stole the show as Long John in Muppet Treasure Island, but that's because he's Tim freaking Curry! He's right there with Weird Al and Neil Patrick Harris in pretty much being a human Muppet himself. Even if Ashanti is a good singer, she just doesn't have the presence as an actor to be the focal point of this film. And the film too often takes away from the Muppets, whose characters only seem to be there because they have to be there. The witch is going to kill Dorothy and take the shoes as part of her reality TV show. Because! But the Munchkin Rats come back to help free Dorothy, Toto, and Fozzie, which leads to...
It's on!
I'm ready!
Come with it!
Yeah! I'm out. Let's just fight now.
Uh-oh, somebody's gonna get witch slapped. We're out of here, boys.
And then, just as Dorothy and the Wicked Witch charge at each other, bam! Blowout fight scene. The gals whip out these huge samurai swords, and they just tear it up. I'm talking kung fu. I'm talking walking on walls. I'm talking explosions everywhere. I'm talking Oz in flames. Burn, baby, burn. You digging it?
Was Quentin Tarantino so desperate to be in a Muppet film that they just tacked on this scene in exchange for him giving them funding? If that's the case, you could have given them enough to do better than that god-awful CGI! And the fight ends by Dorothy kicking the witch into her bath, which of course turns out to be fatal because the bath wasn't filled with bottled water.
And nuts.
And now I've seen the most disturbing thing ever from a Wizard of Oz production. And yes, I've seen Return to Oz. Dorothy and company return to the wizard, and we get the confrontation with him refusing to give them what they want, and we find out that the wizard is actually just some guy played by Jeffrey Tambor?
I'm Francis Cornfine at your service.
Let me see this.
I'm sorry, it says I'm from Hollywood, California, and it says that I drive a tour bus.
I'd say the movie gave up at this point, but that would suggest they were ever actually trying. But yeah, this ending is where everything completely goes off the rails and abandons the original story or any other version completely. The wizard, of course, grants everyone their wish, which for Dorothy supposedly includes making her a music star with a spot on Oz's version of The Ed Sullivan Show.
This whole thing is a lie. It's no different than those fake green glasses in Emerald City. This wizard hasn't given you anything you didn't already have. You really want to grant my wish, wizard? Send me home.
And this would seem like an acceptable moral to end on, except for, well, you'll see.
Well, actually, you have to visit the fourth witch, Glinda, the good witch of the South.
Now, as many of you might be aware, the 1939 film removed the Good Witch of the South from the story altogether, made Glinda the Witch of the North, and had her fill both roles. Which, as some other reviewers have pointed out, kinda makes her a bit of a bitch in that she just shows up at the end to tell Dorothy she's had the ability to go home from the beginning after putting her on that whole journey of death. Of course, this story does actually include the Witch of the South, so what type of perilous journey will our heroes have to go through here to reach her? None! Because it turns out the South Witch was in Munchkinland all along. To be honest though, I'm not sure if that isn't a good thing or not, because who knows what acid-infused lunacy they would have put her in for that journey. And of course, the South Witch falls for the Scarecrow. Because did you really think we were gonna go a whole Muppet movie without some pig-on-frog lovin'? Glinda Piggy tells Dorothy how to get home. Dorothy returns to a storm-ravaged Kansas, where guess what? Kermit and the other Muppets are still in town, because I guess they rode out the storm in a shelter someplace. And he says they love their audition tape and want to give her a spot on their version of American Idol. Yep, so much for that whole not needing fame because of family message they tried to push just 3 minutes ago. And that's Muppet Wizard of Oz. How was it? Pain! On the surface, this has many of the same elements the other Muppet adaptation films had. The story does follow the source material, most of the time. The Muppet casting fits for the characters they portray, for the most part. And there are some gags involving anachronisms and fourth wall breaking. But the problem is those elements are just there and not delivered with the enthusiasm and energy we've seen before. This is a movie with Muppets, but it just doesn't come off as a Muppet movie. It seems more like it was an attempt to launch an acting career for Ashanti, and well, it didn't work. Outside of landing a role on the final season of Army Wives 8 years later, she really didn't go anywhere in film and TV. Though she has apparently landed a role on the remake of Dynasty, so I guess there's that. But the truth remains that people would have watched this movie for the Muppets. And the end result only added to the general belief that Disney just never knew how to properly use them. A feeling that has held for these past 15 years. At the very least, the new Muppets Now series on Disney Plus does look like something that finally uses the Muppets properly in a more contemporary setting, so maybe there at last is hope after all these years. And hey, it's not like Henson Studios ever made anything worse. Brats of the Lost Nebula. Orangoon boys!
You're out of touch. I'm out of. Wah!